Tata my chance, tata my millions. Well, the South African lottery allows all of us to dream big and want a better life. But for others, like the sister-in-law of Deputy President Paul Mashatile, it's an almost guaranteed jackpot. Because it's emerged Kumo Bogatsu's company, Belmont Gaming, is one of the shareholders of Sizakaya Holdings that recently won the license to run the lottery.
Let's look at the facts here. We have South Africa's number 2, who's not his acquaintance or his distant friend from Alex. His actual sister-in-law is benefiting from one of South Africa's biggest contracts. How can you not report that? How can you not make the public aware of that?
This conversation with Amabungane Centre for Investigative Journalism's Azara Karim next. Later in the show, what will it take for the post office to finally become profitable? And finally, debt-laden Cape Townians can expect a rates bill relief.
To stay tuned to The Lead for every edition, hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels.
Stay tuned until the show's end to hear your comments. If you'd like to engage us on this episode's topics, you can send your thoughts and opinions to our official The Lead WhatsApp line. That number is 072 562 3179. And my name's Graham Robenheimer. Let's chat all this and more right here on The Lead on News 24. Deputy President Paul Mashatile's sister-in-law has reason to celebrate. It's been revealed that Kumo Bogatsu's company, Belmont Gaming, is among the key shareholders of Sizakaya Holdings. It's the company that's won one of the country's most lucrative government tenders. Yes, the license to operate our lottery. It's quite the politically connected jackpot, if you ask us. But all involved deny that that's the case. But to tell us more about what she uncovered in her sleuthing, we're joined by journalist Azara Karim with the Amabungane Centre for Investigative Journalism. Azara, thank you so much for your time and welcome to your debut edition of The Lead.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Fantastic. You've really done some fantastic work here, reading through everything. It's very sort of easy to read. I would like you to just sort of take me through the network as we understand it within the constructs of this story. Let's try and connect the dots, if you will, in terms of this latest development in the lottery licensee awarding. Who is Kumo Bogatsu, first of all? Who's her partner in business? And how do they relate to Deputy President Paul Mashatile?
As you've said, Sizakaya Holdings has been awarded this multi-billion rand tender to operate the national lotto for the next 8 years. Sizakaya Holdings is connected to Kumo Bogatsu in that Kumo is a director of a company called Belmont Gaming, and she directs this with a politically connected businessman named Moses Tbebe. Now, Kumo Bogatsu is the twin sister of the deputy president's wife, Humile Mashatile. She was Humile Bogatsu. So that is his sister-in-law. And amid these familial connections, Moses Tbebe and the deputy president also seem to be pretty comfortable together, according to a lot of information that we found in our investigation.
So one thing that struck me from the Amabungane investigation, Azara, is that Belmont Gaming hasn't really been around for a hell of a long time. It feels very sort of overnight-ish, and it doesn't strike me as a shareholder company in Sizakaya. Of course, it's a minority shareholder company, but that doesn't really necessarily have a long track record. Is that right?
Exactly, and the timing is quite interesting. So if you go back to 2023, Paul Mashatile and his newlywed wife, Humile, get married in a very, very lavish wedding attended by the political and business elite. That was in March 2023. 9 months later, Belmont Gaming is registered in December 2023. Now, that was just before, if I'm not mistaken, it was just before the lotto license tender request for proposal opened up or was due. The timing there is quite interesting. But Moses Tbebe, when he spoke to Amabungane, maintained that, he didn't give a lot of information as to what Belmont Gaming does. And it doesn't seem like they really have a track record. It's only been maybe 1.5 years. But he simply said that, it's a fully licensed gaming operator and a minority shareholder in Sizekaya.
Kumo Bogatsu's co-director here within this particular ambit of this company is the businessman Moses Tbebe, right? Also seemingly quite close to the deputy president. What do we know about their public engagements? Because that's been sort of a key tenet of your reporting, is how you've managed to uncover how seemingly close that they are, brushing shoulders in public.
Yeah. So Belmont Gaming is actually part of a group of companies. Well, not in terms of structure, but it's part of the Belmont Group. Moses Tbebe has about 15 companies that bear the Belmont name, Belmont Investments, Properties, so on and so on. He gets that name from where he lives, which is Umdloti, Belmont Road in Umdloti, KwaZulu-Natal. Now, people in the area have told Amabungane that they have frequently spotted the president's presidential protection units, which is, the blue lights and the cars and the motorbikes and the whole shebang, often in the area. And in fact, they said that he frequented Moses Tembe's house quite a lot last year. And in 2023, the PPU was said to have stayed over at Tembe's house for around 6 days during the time when the ANC had its manifesto launch at Moses Mabhida Stadium. So that already indicates quite a closeness there, chomies sort of, maybe.
No, definitely. That's you staying in somebody's house. It's lekker.
And then we have pictures of Moses and Mashatile together. Around the time that, Mashatile had his 6-day stay ahead of the manifesto launch, they were pictured together at St. Paul's Anglican Church. That was during a memorial service to honor those who had lost their lives in a bus crash coming back from Moses Mabhida Stadium at the same time. They were sitting right next to each other, and if you look at the article that we published this morning, you can see that picture. Moses Tbebe told us that he was invited there in his personal capacity by his cousin, who was a reverend at that church. And then most recently, we have confirmed that Moses accompanied the deputy president to his diplomatic trip to France. And there is also pictures of him at a dinner there. Now, again, Tbebe said that he was there in his capacity as part of Belmont to encourage foreign investment in South Africa.
Sure. And for everybody listening thus far, I thought it would be prudent of us to just remind us about the network, right? So we've got the Deputy President, Paul Mashatile. He's married to Humile Mashatile, and her sister is Kumo Bogatsu, who happens to be the co-director with Moses Tbebe in Belmont Gaming, which is a minority shareholder company within Sizekaya Holdings, which won this lottery license. And you illustrated to us thus far how many of these people are in connection with one another, whether or not it's social, staying at one another's homes, or being out in public engagements, official or not. We, of course, know about another ANC-linked businessman involved within the makeup of Sizekaya, and that's Sandile Zungu. Who is he, and who makes up the rest of Sizekaya Holdings here?
Yeah, so Sandile Zungu is another notable figure in this whole connection. He leads Sizekaya Holdings alongside Moses Tbebe. Now, that brings us to the entire bigger structure beyond Belmont Gaming of who has a stake in Sizekaya. So Sizekaya so let's start from the top. There is a Mauritian-based company called Astoria, and it has shareholding in Gold Rush Holdings. Now, Gold Rush Holdings in turn has a shareholding in Gold Rush Group, and Gold Rush Group in Sizekaya Holdings. Now, Zungu was the director of Gold Rush up until I think it's about 2023 where he resigned, but he still in some way, it's not clear yet, has a role to play in Sizekaya. And he's quite notable because he is very politically connected, and in fact attended the France trip along with Mashatile and Tbebe on behalf of his company Zungu Investments.
And obviously that France trip, and you reminded me, I was like, hey, what happened to Nathi Mthethwa? Oh, he's the ambassador for South Africa in France, and that's who they met up with. I was like, I wondered what happened to our arts and culture minister. Although he's held so many other positions in different departments, it's hard to keep track, right? Okay, so what does Mr. Mashatile, the Deputy President's spokesperson, Keith Khoza, the National Lotteries Commission, the Sizekaya Group, as well as Trade and Industry Minister Parks Tau, they have been fielding questions as many of the opposition parties have been pushing for a clearer look, more transparency regarding the bid process here, Azara. So what are they all saying? Let's start with Keith Khoza. I know he's been a very busy man as a spokesperson recently because there has been action, I say, on their tail about, the exorbitant travel costs that the Deputy President's been footing at the taxpayers' expense, jetting off 5 million rand in the UK, 900,000 rand stay for accommodation in Japan. So what did Keith say? What did he tell you?
Well, just on that point, let me just add that, Amabungane has also reported on this specific trip as well, and found that these tenderpreneurs also accompanied Mashatile on that France trip, who are currently under investigation by Joburg Water. Sure. So it opens up again. News 24 also did an extensive investigation called Mashatile Unmasked into Mashatile's networks, his life of excess, and sort of who he surrounds himself with. And it opens up those questions still. But Keith Khoza, his spokesperson, gave a pretty terse response to Amabungane, said that the handling of the Lotto license process does not fall within Mashatile's delegated responsibilities, and he in no way, shape or form interfered in the process. He sort of distanced himself essentially from his sister-in-law being in Belmont. That was about a paragraph of response. But more interesting is the National Lotteries Commission and the Department of Trade and Industry, who didn't respond to Amabungane's questions. Originally, the NLC said that the department has to answer, and then the department didn't say anything. And obviously that's an issue, but it's an issue because the opaqueness of the whole situation is leading to more suspicions, more questions around who is really benefiting here and what is the entire structure of Sizekaya and everyone that has a shareholding or stake in the company.
And I felt like in your piece, a lot of the responses that we were getting were like, how dare you suggest that this is a case of political patronage, if you will. Your response to that, your feeling on the face of the investigation and what you guys have uncovered?
Yeah, the response has been confusing because it's oftentimes where we write stories and they say, oh, but what about Ramaphosa and Phala? And sure. But let's look at the facts here. We have South Africa's number 2, who's, not his acquaintance or his distant friend from Alex. His actual sister-in-law is benefiting from one of South Africa's biggest contracts. How can you not report that? How can you not make the public aware of that? Should we have not reported it then? I don't understand the argument.
100%. And then, of course, we've had these opposition parties in Parliament. They've been pushing for answers over the lottery license bid process. And, it strikes me as a huge red flag that Belmont Gaming in itself, it doesn't really have a proven track record. It's come up so very quickly in the timeline for the bid process to happen. Of course, all of us as South Africans deserve more transparency, especially in light of the fact that the lottery in this country carries a corruption paintbrush, if you will. We've known it as being linked to corruption for the longest time. There's been so many stories of dodginess. Why is it then, perhaps I'm answering my own question, so important for us to stay on top of this story? Because I also thought quite interesting in your reporting is because you do show that, in fact, there's billions to be made here. It is one of the most lucrative government contracts.
As far as we've seen, there's a lot more. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And judging from how evasive the department and the commission has been in sharing information on shareholding and directorship and companies connected to Sizekaya, there's a lot more under the iceberg. Amabungane we've submitted a promotion of access to information application to access that. And we've submitted a Core 24, which is you submitted to 2 companies to obtain shareholding. So we'll see from that, and we'll see if we get the proper records. But there's amid these political parties, including, as you said, Build One South Africa and the EFF raising red flags already in the process, and the political connections of people involved in those processes, it's now more important than ever to really understand everything that's going on, not only behind Sizekaya, but also going on above and beyond the process of the award. And
Azara, correct me if I'm wrong here, at this stage, Sizekaya, although they were meant to start being the official sort of lottery licensee at this point of the timeline, they're in fact not, because there was this other court bid from one of the other bidders who were unhappy with the process, and so that's sort of stalled things. Where do we sit now in terms of who's actually meant to be running the lottery?
Well, yeah, so that bid stalled things. It was supposed to, because the court ruled that the minister extending the bid validity was not constitutional, and him wanting to give a temporary license was also not legal. But the minister did that anyway, and he issued a temporary license, and essentially he extended the time that Ituba had to operate the national lottery. And then we saw on the weekend that Sunday Times reported that a new court case opened up or was launched. And this one essentially compels the minister to give reasons as to why he awarded the lotto license to Sizekaya, and provide a full record of that reason. And it's interesting because in those court papers, the person representing the company says that they think that they are of the opinion that the minister did not investigate or do due diligence on indirect financial interests in the company in Sizekaya.
Sure, it's getting lekker ingewikkeld now. So obviously that would mean why Minister Tau then, Azara, didn't want to give you the official responses, because now he's obviously being summoned by a court. Whatever he's going to be saying in an affidavit would thus be court records in future going ahead, right?
Well, yeah, but nobody in the court case has brought up this specific link of the involvement of the deputy president. So that could open up a lot of other legal challenges and further legal scrutiny over the minister. But I disagree with the notion that because there's a court case happening, that government shouldn't be transparent because of that. And they often plead that the matter is sub judice, but that's not a legal argument to have. We need to be taken into the confidence of the minister as the public. And I understand that legally the losing bidders do as well.
And that's Azara Karim. She's an investigative journalist with the Amabongane Center for Investigative Journalism. Her latest piece, Lottery Jackpot, Mashatile's family tied to new multi-billion rand operated deal. Kumo Bakhatsu, the sister-in-law, is the twin sister of second lady Humile Mashatile. She co-owns Belmont Gaming with businessman Moses Tbebe. They all know each other, and yet they've backed this massive lucrative tender. Azara, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to your next installment in the series.
Thank you for having me.
To our trending topic now, and it's often the butt of the joke for its snail mail delivery service, but the South African Post Office is again promising to become profitable despite its nearly 9 billion rand debt burden. Parliamentarians heard from SAPO executives that the new aim is to restructure the office as a digital logistics and financial services player and to achieve an ambitious net profit of nearly 1.5 billion rand by 2029. This is before attempting to break even by 2027, but SAPO's fortunes look grim after National Treasury denied it a 3 billion rand bailout last year. Still, moving more into e-commerce may soon put the post office into direct competition with companies like Postnet. SAPO wants to convert its nationwide branch network into logistics hubs, scaling up to around 2,000 access points, whilst offering last-mile delivery options for local retailers. It'll all come at a cost, though, with plans for a 28% reduction in staff salaries. But MPs have not been that convinced, even if SAPO executives are eyeing potential public-private partnerships to reposition the post office. And for former CEO Mark Barnes, he's always argued that unless political interference is stopped, no turnaround plan will ever work. It all feels like the latest chapter in South Africa's version of Groundhog Day. Well, speaking of Barnes, you can find his latest podcast, Listen Up, co-hosted with Tim Cohen, on all of your favorite streaming platforms and, of course, on the front page of News 24. Enjoy. And finally, Cape Town's ratepayers and businesses collectively owe the city nearly 10 billion rand in old debt. But the council says it's struggling to recover this amount, so it's now considering clearing the slate to the tune of around 2.2 billion. This, however, will only be for those residents who can prove that they're struggling financially. Now it's up to the rest of council to okay this move. You could get a 100% debt write-off on arrears if your property is valued between 450,000 rand and 2.5 million. And qualifying poorer households could get their entire accounts cleared. The city believes that the country's economic situation's not improved since the pandemic, affecting the rates collection. The committee is also arguing that deleting the debt will incentivize people to pay their bills again. But civic group Stop COCT claims the whole initiative just shows us that the city is unable to finalize huge municipal bills. The city recently came under public pressure to provide relief where it can, promising to lower bills, whilst in Johannesburg, the metro there's increasing tariffs in a bid to turn around urban decay and better its ailing service delivery levels. From politically connected lotto deals to potential post office pipe dreams, well, that's been our show and the week's only really begun. Thanks so much for your comments on our last episode from Thursday. Karen Morn demystifies the NPA's extradition ruling headache. That story, of course, detailing how the way South Africa's prosecutors go about extraditing the criminally accused from another country to face justice here is now under intense scrutiny. It all basically comes back to this 2014 Supreme Court of Appeal ruling that has now set somewhat of a precedence that basically says that the Justice Minister, not the NPA, is allowed to make extradition requests, and this is now basically casting somewhat of a dark cloud over several other cases that may be affected by this, even including the murder case of rapper Keenan aka Forms, as well as Tbebe Tibbs Motswane. We got one of your comments on that particular post here. Don't believe what you read, as their profile name writes, how come the judges, quote unquote, don't find substance over form and find it in the interests of justice and not a technicality? Eddie van Dierman responded saying that really is the question. Well, definitely one to put through to our legal journalist Karen Morn, but as I understand it, any higher court, and in this case it was the Supreme Court, thus sets the precedent, and until that matter has been sort of finalized through the appeals process or ratified perhaps by the Constitutional Court, any higher court decision will then have a bearing on any other lower court matters that are still to be heard. Of course, if you'd like to engage us on this episode's topics, you can send us your thoughts and opinions to our official The Lead WhatsApp line. That number is 072 562 3179, and mail us thelead@24.com. You can hit the follow and subscribe buttons too. That's depending on which platform you're on, to be updated on the next edition. Well, my name's Graham Robert. It's only Monday. So long as there's news, we'll have the lead on News 24.